Hi, everyone. Anna speaking. Thank you for being here with me. Before we get started, can I please check that everyone can hear me and see me okay? You can raise your hand or you can write it in the chat. I will see either. Okay, thank you so much. Lots of you helping me out. Thank you. Okay, everyone can see me and hear me okay. Thank you. So we're going to get started. And I would love to start by introducing myself. So my name is Anna White. I'm an occupational therapist here at the LightHouse Arabia. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you guys today. Thank you for joining me. Happy Wednesday. We're nearly at the end of the week. And I know for many of you, you may be traveling or you may be finishing up things in the next week or two, as many people are, many of my clients as well. But just to give you a bit of a background on me. So as I said, my name is Anna. I'm an occupational therapist. I work here in the Lighthouse with children and teens mainly. I also do a lot of parenting work and a lot of our mental health outreach services, such as this webinar today. Thank you for being with me. I really love presenting, so I hope that I can keep you guys engaged and energized, and I really hope that by the end of this training that you walk away with something that you didn't walk in with, or I should say you're looking at. And without further ado, I'm going to get started. So I will ask that you write any questions that you may have during this webinar in the Q&A box. I will not be able to see those questions until the end, but I will get to them at the end. I want to do around 45 to 50 minutes of presentation, and then I want to leave some time for question and answers. All right. And that's everything really. If in any case that I drop out, it never happens, but just in case it does, I will be back. I'm here in the clinic and our internet is very stable, but just in case, you never know, please click the same link and I will be back to you guys. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. You should be able to see it. Let me put it on full screen. All right, there we go. Please feel free to move my face around wherever it suits your visual preference. And let's get started. So today we're talking about a topic that we've been talking about for quite some time with COVID, but I still think it's very relevant. And I think sometimes as time goes on, we really have to remind ourselves why emotional resilience is so important during uncertain times. Okay. We can consider COVID-19 as an uncertain time. We can consider the last 2 years as uncertain times. But the strategies that I share today are not just for COVID, they're for any kind of uncertain times that you or your colleagues or your peers or families might experience. So this is any kind of uncertain times, any shift, any change within your norm of living. All right. So for those of you who are not familiar with the LightHouse Arabia, we are a mental health and wellness clinic. We are based in Sakim, Al Wasl, Dubai. We are well known for our psychology services. We have over 35 psychologists with us right now, but we also have psychiatry, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, and a whole lot of other things that you see on this screen, such as free of charge support groups. We are home to the Rami Grief Center, mental health first aid, and the list goes on. I won't spend too long on this slide. If anyone has any questions about our services at the Lighthouse, please ask me and I will go into detail on any of those things previously mentioned. So without further ado, let's look at our agenda. So what do I want to talk about today? Well, I want to start by talking about COVID-19 overwhelm. And notice here why I didn't say anxiety, because it's not just anxiety. There is a sea of emotions going on with many people right now, and many people think we should be over this. You know, we should have moved on from COVID. We should be making plans, but sometimes it just seems to keep going on, and sometimes we really need to check in with ourselves and say, I need a moment. I need to regather myself. I need to look at where I am and how my thoughts are. And that is what we're going to look at. And the first step in that is understanding your own emotions, understanding why maybe you or someone around you is feeling overwhelmed. And then I want to look at how we can look at what's inside your control and what are those things that we are going to have to let go to because they're outside of your control. Many of us find that we spend so much time contemplating contemplating, overthinking about all of those things that we just cannot control. So what I want you to do is acknowledge those things today, and I want to bring you back to those things that you can control, because that is when you will feel empowered. That is when you will be able to be more emotional resilient, and you will be able to thrive and not just survive in your daily life. We're then going to be looking at tiny tweaks that you can make that lead to big changes. And I would say what I want you guys to consider during this training is not to feel that you have to take on every single strategy that I'm going to share. I want you to pick one thing today, just one thing, one slide that I share and say, I'm going to try this. Okay. For many of you, you might feel like this is very plain and simple. This is basic, but I want you to really focus on that one thing. It's not that I don't want you guys to implement all of the strategies, is that we always need to start with that first step. And I guarantee you, for those of you who try and take on everything, you'll probably end up doing nothing. So pick one thing that I talk about today, work on that, and then the rest of those steps will come naturally. All right. Okay, I can see many more of you have joined, so welcome. My name is Anna, for those of you who have joined late. A pleasure to be with you guys today. And we are here talking about emotional resilience during uncertain times. So welcome, more than welcome. So let us start by acknowledging that we are overwhelmed. And as humans, we are wired to detect threat. And I want you to think about this, mainly from a stress response, an anxiety response. That is why we are here today as humans. We have the ability to detect stress, and our bodies naturally respond to that to protect us. And evolution, that is why we're here. That fight or flight response is activated. It's a survival instinct. And when you think about it from a kind of evolutionary point of view, there was a time, for example, when a bear may be chasing after a human, okay? And that fight or flight response, that stress response that's based in the amygdala in the brain would go off. And as a result, this person would either fight or they would flight, they would run, or maybe even they would freeze, okay? But what's happened now is that we can activate this stress response through a single thought alone. So we don't need that bear running after us. We don't need anyone running after us. You can be sitting on a beach in the Maldives, enjoying your time, and you can have a single thought that will activate or could activate that same stress response, okay? Which is really stressful. And it's not healthy. It's not healthy for our mental health, and it's definitely not healthy for our physical health as well. Okay, when we look at words that we use like the new normal, social distancing, vaccine, these are very triggering words. Now, you might think that a single thought about a word such as vaccine, but ask yourself, how does it make you feel? I know for myself, when I'm listening to people talking about their week or sharing news, the minute I hear the word vaccine, I'm listening, okay? It's a little bit triggering for me. When I hear other words, it is triggering. Even in your subconscious, you may feel triggered by these words. And these words are the story that we tell us. And you might think that they're just words, or, you know, I'm not really going to behave any differently, or his story is not going to affect my feelings. But unfortunately, that is psychology. Our thoughts affect how we feel, and how we feel affect how we behave. Okay, so what I'm asking you to do is acknowledge and be mindful of these triggering words. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom three sections here have really been flipped with COVID, okay? So when we look at our physiological needs, okay, breathing, water, food, shelter, people are concerned that they're running out of things, that these essential things for themselves or their family are being compromised with COVID or with the changes that COVID has brought on. When we look at our safety and security, a big one that I'm seeing right now is the sense of what ifs. What if I'm made redundant? What if I get another salary cut? What if I don't have those perks that I had last time? How can I provide? How can I keep myself or my family safe? And last but not least, it is that sense of love and belonging. Now, for many of us, we feel that any of these things in the love and belonging section have been compromised. Many of you may not be in your home country right now. You're away from family. I hear many people saying to me that they've had enough of Zoom, they've had enough of online meetings, enough phone call. They just want to be at home and with their family. So we need to be mindful when you ask yourself, am I overwhelmed? And the answer is yes, I am feeling unsteady, I am feeling overwhelmed. these are some of the answers. And sometimes we have to just acknowledge these things if you really want to be able to accept them and move on and, of course, thrive. We've lots of loss, we've lots of changes that are going on right now. These are just some of them. But I want you to ask yourself, and I guess this is a moment of reflection in the webinar today, or if you're beside someone, you can ask that person. But what has changed for you and what have you lost? Okay, now I'm not trying to bring in negativity. I'm not trying to make you overthink about things that maybe you don't want to think about, or you've pushed under the carpet, or you've put to the side. But the thing is, until you acknowledge where your head is at, you will not be able to work on those things, accept them, and move on, and really live to the maximum potential that you can live to. So acknowledge these things. Acknowledge to yourself, maybe I'm not doing okay. Maybe I'm doing better than I thought. Maybe I'm really concerned about some of these things on this slide, or maybe I'm not. Maybe you have took a grasp on these, you acknowledge these things, you know they're there. But if you're that person who's feeling unsettled or overwhelmed right now, or just not really feeling a sense of fulfillment, I want you to ask yourself, is it that I'm trying to cover something? Am I hiding something? Because the first step is just identifying what's going on. And that sense of identification is where we all start, no matter whether you're helping yourself, you're helping someone else, or you're in therapy. All right. So how am I going to share these things with you to do? And how do I want you to adopt and adapt? And I guess this is where I really want to share key habits. And these are not my key habits, although I do use a lot of these habits. These are evidence-based practice. These are things that are anchored in research-based professional evidence that many people use, and they work. As I said at the start, some of you guys might bypass some of these things and say, you know, diet, sleep, yeah, okay, I want to work on something else. But remember that you cannot work on anything else unless you check in with the foundations. And the foundations are mental health and physical health, because you have to remember that you cannot have health without having mental health and physical health. And these things are really tied into each other. All right. My hope for today is that you walk away from this webinar and you feel that you have something in your toolbox of managing stress techniques that you didn't have when we started this webinar, okay? I want you guys to feel that you can really thrive in uncertain times and not just survive, because survival is hard. And with survival, we're waiting for the next fix. We're waiting for that flight to open. We're waiting for that vaccine to be approved in our home country, or whatever it might be for you. We can't always wait. Sometimes we have to accept where we are and what our situation is. But accepting will really help you thrive and will help you jump up to that next step. All right. As I mentioned, I want you to take one of these slides and one of these strategies at a time. We always know that the secret of getting ahead is simply just getting started. So today I want you guys to get started and ask questions. Share with me your thoughts, share with me where you are, and I'm happy to support as much as I can. All right. So when I mentioned foundation, this is the first thing that I want you to be mindful of. I want you today to look at resetting your stress threshold. Now, what do we mean by this? Okay, you can have a look at this slide when I'm talking, but I will go through it as well. We always say in therapy that if your mind is out of control, okay, if this thing up here, if you're losing it a little bit, it's out of control, you need to go back to the body. Okay, you need to go back to your physical body, and that's what it's all about. Okay, it's about coming back to yourself. It's about grounding yourself, and it's about resetting. Okay, if you look at your second brain, so let's say your first brain, the main brain, is gone. I want you guys to think about your second brain. And if you Google your second brain, you'll find things like your skin, your heart, your gut, all of those things. And I want you to come back and focus on those things when your mind is out of control, because that is where you and we all will find some sense of equilibrium. All right. A very important concept in this mind-body connection is what you see here on the slide. And that is the vagal nerve. Okay, what is this? This is it is the second largest nerve that we have. And it is kind of seen as like a connection. All right. It sits at the base of your brain, right behind your vocal cords. And it is the thing that connects everything and make sense of many things that we think about, okay? So when we look at that part of the neck, where it is, that part of the lower brain, it's what connects us to our organs, our neck, our chest, and all of those things. And it is the battery, so it is that source of power for our rest and digest system. So if you feel, and this is another moment where you guys can reflect on yourself, but if you have a good vagal tone, what will mean is that your rest and digest system is powered, okay? And it doesn't need to be triggered. It doesn't need so much energy to be turned on, okay? How can you increase it? By doing any of these things on this slide. We're looking at meditation. We're looking at all of those things. And I guess one of the big things for me is sleep. Now, I love talking about sleep. For those of you who are interested in sleep, I wish it was a different webinar, and we do have other webinars on sleep, because sleep is something really that you cannot cover in a webinar that's not purely about sleep. But sleep is essential. So many things happen inside our brains and our bodies when we sleep. It's like a whole battery is restored. And I want you to think about it. If you're someone who doesn't sleep very well, how do you wake up in the morning? You're starting your day probably on not a very good note. You're starting to overthink things. You're starting to think about how bad your sleep was. Whereas if you wake up and you feel refreshed and you feel more organized, you'll find instantly that you are less stressed than you were going to bed. All right, 7 to 8 hours is what we would recommend. Now, this is general. You may need more or you may need slightly less, but the recommendation is 7 to 8 hours. And the best sleep happens, so the more pathways are connected, the more we actually get into that rest and digest stage, is between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So be mindful of that. Nutrition, of course, we know that nutrients are our powerhouse and are what feeds us and what we strive on. So be mindful of that. As I mentioned, the gut is the second brain. So take probiotics, take omega-3 fatty acids, limit your caffeine, sugar, and alcohol intake. And when we talk about caffeine, and this is something that many of you might be having coffee right now when you're listening to me, caffeine can work really well for people, but I want you to think about what caffeine does to you. All right, when you have caffeine, you might feel more alert. It's not in your head. Things happen inside your body to make you feel more alert. Your heart rate might increase. You might raise up. You might pay more attention. You might feel like your vision improves. But when you take caffeine, what you're doing and what it's doing to someone that might be anxious or slightly overwhelmed is they're kind of injecting themselves with a shot of anxiety or a shot of overwhelm. And that is what you're doing, because caffeine will give you that exact same effect as that stress response that your body has, where you become more alert and ready to fight or flight, whatever your fight or flying from today. So be mindful of caffeine. Okay, many people think that caffeine will wake them up and it will regulate them. It may wake you up, but it will not really regulate you unless you want to become more alert. So for those of you who are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit anxious, limit your caffeine, okay? And caffeine does not just come from coffee or espresso shots. Caffeine can be in tea and many other foods, so be mindful of that. Hydration, we know, is extremely important. And I think for those of you who are still working at home, hydration is something that we often forget about. I think when we are working in offices or in an open space, there's plenty of water machines around. There's plenty of excuses to get up and have a glass of water, or to mingle, or to have a break in the kitchen in the common area. But when we're at home, sometimes we really need to be mindful of this. So be mindful of how much water you're drinking. And if you're someone who just doesn't know, get a bottle that is a 2-liter bottle or a 1 liter, and then you know you're measuring how much water you're taking every day. All right. Exercise. Now, as an occupational therapist, I hold exercise very close to my heart, simply because I know how powerful exercise is. Now, I am not asking you guys to run to your nearest gym and to pick up some weights and do a body pump class. That is not what we're talking about here. I'm asking you just to start moving. Okay, moving. We know from research that movement counteracts fear. When you move, you reduce any single emotion that is built up in your body. Whether you're feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling jealous, you name it, whatever it is, when we move, those feelings are counteracted, they're lessened. All right, extremely important. If anybody wants to know more about what kinds of exercises they need to be doing or how much they should be doing, please ask me. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more if we have time at the end. All right. And last but not least, a routine check of hormonal imbalances and any kind of nutritional deficits is really important. We know, okay, we know that there are many hormonal imbalances that can cause and that can look like different mental health difficulties like anxiety or depression. And you can go and get treatment for those things, but if there are underlying medical concerns, no matter how much therapy you do, those things will still be there. So be mindful of that. It's always the first thing that we ask when you come to therapy is to rule out any potential medical concerns that may be underneath. Second is mindset. Now, you might feel that this is a very basic one, all right? So this is strategy number 2. What is mindset? We need to shift our mindset if you're feeling that you are not in the right one, all right? Often what we do, as I mentioned before, is that we fight the feelings, all right? It's easy to fight the feelings sometimes. If you don't think about them, they're not there. That's what we think. But I want you to think about it like a volcano. All right, it is there. And the more that you ignore and the more that you put things to one side, or as we say, brushing under the carpet, the bigger that the problem will get. It does not go away. Okay, we know that it does not go away. It comes back bigger and better and stronger, and sometimes more difficult to try and tame and manage. So don't fight those difficult feelings. Have a willingness to accept the ups and the downs, okay? Now, I'm not saying to you today that I want every one of you to have a positive mindset. All right, that's not what I'm saying, that you should start talking and enforcing positivity on your team and your family and your partners. But what I'm asking you to do is be realistic about your mindset during difficult times, whether it's COVID, whether it's a family or work situation that you are going through, but be realistic and have a mindset that says, I am willing to accept the ups and the downs. I am willing to name them, to say them out loud, because only when I name them can I tame them. We always say, name it to tame it. You've got to name how you're feeling if you actually want to tame it. So be mindful of that. We like to say as well that what you resist will always persist. And I promise you that. Don't resist it because it will get bigger. It does not always mean that you need to sign up to therapy. That's not what I'm saying either. You need to sign up to professional support. Some of you, you might feel that, yes, I need professional support. But for some of you, it might just be acknowledging. It might just be becoming a little bit more self-aware and saying, do you know what? I'm not feeling okay. This week has been terrible and this is why. And I promise you that the minute that you say it, you will feel better. And this is research. There's research out there shows that the part of the brain called the amygdala that has that fight or flight, like a light switch, it flashes on and off. The minute that you name your feelings, the minute you say out loud, I'm feeling really frustrated today, the minute that you name it, that activity in the brain starts to slow down. So just start saying it. Say it to yourself, say it to someone else, whoever you want to talk to about it. This will help you, but it will also help the people around you. Why? Because when you are open and honest and when you are vulnerable in some capacity, people will feel more vulnerable coming to you. All right. If I walk into my kitchen today and I say, I've had a really tough day, I'm struggling, whoever's listening to me is probably going to feel that they can be more open about how they're feeling. Whereas if I come home and say, I've had the most amazing day, life was great today, I'm just so good, people are going to be less likely to talk to me. So if you're in a team where you feel, I want to be more approachable, I want to be more open, I want to help myself, but I also want to help other people, start by doing that. All right. We want you to be more emotionally resilient. And what does that mean? And I guess that's something that I want to explain to you now. And I don't like explaining it at the start because it's without any context. So I hope by this stage of the webinar, you feel that you have a bit of context of what I'm trying to get across to you today. Emotional resilience is not about being okay all the time. It's not about being super positive all the time, but it's about accepting that when bad things or down days happen, that you go down, but you bounce back faster, okay? Because you have those supports in place. You are able to acknowledge what's going on and you are able to pick a strategy and use it, whether it be talk to someone, going to the gym, going for a walk, whatever those strategies are, okay? Where someone who does not have any emotional resilience will go down, but they will stay down in that mood and at that level for much longer because they don't have the tools, they don't have the support network or the coping strategies. So emotional resilience is about being able to accept the ups and the downs and bouncing back. And it is a muscle. Okay, don't have the mindset that after this webinar or after going to a self-help class or going to the gym that you are going to feel that you are in a different mindset. It is a muscle. And I will always explain it like a muscle. It is a muscle that grows that you have to be patient with and you have to work on. All right. Usually the motivation comes after. So it's not about you saying, all right, I'm gonna have a mindset today to start meditating and doing things for me. And what happens tomorrow? You walk into work and you say, you know, I tried what that Anna woman told me yesterday and it wasn't for me. I didn't like it. I hated it. I went for a walk and I hated it. It's too hot outside. It's not about that, because think about it from a physical health point of view. If I ask you for your fitness, for your physical fitness to go to the gym today, many of you will say, I didn't enjoy it. I did it because why? Because I know it's good for my physical health. So what I'm asking you to do is start doing things for your mental health, whether you enjoy them or not, because usually that enjoyment will only come after time when you start to see the benefits. So start practicing and prioritizing it. All right. And last but not least, think about what's happening to you versus what's happening for you. All right. When we say that it's happening to me, this is all about me, we're victimizing ourselves. Why did they do that? Why did they close it? Of course this would happen to me. Of course my flight to Ireland would get cancelled. Of course my vaccine is not recognized. All right. Whatever you say, if you believe that that's happening to you, you are painting the picture to yourself that you are a victim. Okay. And when you paint that picture, you become the victim. And if you want to live that story and paint that story, you will get stuck in that story. Whereas if you change your mindset and you say, this is happening for me, this is for the greater good, this is for my protection. There are restrictions in place and there's another lockdown, let's say, because this is to support us. This is to help us get through another difficult time. Okay, how can you experience growth during this time? And that is how. It's when you don't look at the things that are thrown at you and say it's happening to me. You say, okay, it's happening, but it's happening for me. And I'm going to work with what I've now been placed with, and I'm going to grow through this. Okay, I want you to think about something, and it's not going through this or not getting through COVID, like I mentioned, it's growing through it. And that is where the magic happens, you could say. It's when you acknowledge that I don't just have to go through COVID, because you're going to be going through it for a long time. Okay, things are going to happen. And when COVID ends, and hopefully it will end soon, but when this ends, there will be another uncertain time in your life. And the same feelings will come back. And there may be another and another. And for those of you who are parents, you will have to deal with this for your kids as well. Okay, uncertain times will always happen. So don't wait for it to be over. Learn the strategies that you can implement whenever these things happen, because that is when you will really grow. And that is when you will see that you will become more emotionally resilient. What's your language? So language, how do you feel about your language? And ask yourself, how do you communicate? But you have to remember that the language that you speak and the language that you talk and the words that you use, that is the picture that you create for yourself. Okay. So if you say, I'm so unfortunate and I'm definitely going to get a reduction in my salary soon, and I think I'm going to be next to go. If you speak to yourself like that, that will become your reality. All right. If you say things like social isolation, I feel so isolated right now, that will become your story. But I want you to challenge your language. Let's take social isolation an example. No one is socially isolated. Okay. We might be alone, we might be doing things alone, but we are staying safe. We're staying indoors. We are not isolated. We all have phones. Most of us have social media. Most of us have in some way have a connection to people. We might have to make more of an effort. It might not be our preferred mode of contact, but we are not socially isolated. So start saying things, and for yourself, for your kids, for your colleagues and friends. Start saying things like, I'm staying safe, I'm staying indoors. I'm staying 2 meters apart from people. All right, start using those words. Quarantine, that's a very outdated word. I want you to use words like keeping safe. I'm keeping myself safe. I'm keeping others safe. I'm working on myself from that respect. All right, the new normal. It's different. It's interesting. Is it an adventure? But start using these more positive words, because I promise you, you will trick your brain into start picking up these words. And then, and only then, will you start to look at that mindset changing, and your language will start to change. All right. Avoid the word don't. And this, especially for those of you who are parents, this is a tip that I always give to parents that I work with. Avoid that word don't or no. Why? Because that word in itself is triggering, okay? The minute, think about it right now, the minute I say to you, I've one thing to ask you, don't, the minute I say don't, that part of the brain is switched on and it's ready to fight back. So be mindful of that. Don't use the word don't. Focus on what you need to do rather than what you can't do or you don't do. Build your inner house, all right? Look at these words and think about where you are on this journey. Alone versus loneliness. Being alone, our society has kind of put this idea on us that if you are alone, it means that you must be lonely. If you are single, you must be lonely. If you're not married, you must be lonely. If you're married, you're not lonely. That is not true. Alone is a very external state, okay? Feeling lonely is a very internal state. And if you are feeling lonely, and if you really are lonely, okay, you will be lonely whether you are married or single or in the biggest group of friends or whether you're by yourself. Loneliness follows you, okay? So be mindful of that. Solitude versus isolation, okay? Now, you can meet two different people. One person might say, I'm very grateful for my solitude. I love spending time alone. And some people might say, I'm very isolated. I'm completely alone. I've no one around me and I just feel closed off. But be mindful of that, okay? We presume if people are alone, as I said, they're going to be very lonely. But solitude is something that's a personal choice. So if you say, I'm finding happiness or I'm finding some kind of security in in being solitude by myself, it's very different than telling people and telling yourself that you're isolated. And I want you to be mindful of that, because isolation is usually forced and it's very external. It comes from the outside. Solitude is something where you can really grow. Okay, we talk about philosophers, the greatest philosophers alive. They all talk about their solitude, how they close themselves off from social media, from their friends, even some from their family, where they really stopped all of these barriers that really were kind of too intrusive. And that is where they really learned. That is where windows of opportunity and learning really blossomed. So be mindful of that word and embrace your solitude. Embrace the time that you are by yourself, because that is when you will be able to connect with your thoughts. That is when you will be able to reflect and find yourself again. Or as I said at the start of this webinar, that is really where you will be able to realign and press that reset button. But if you are constantly busy on the go, running ahead, you will never be able to really find that sense of solitude and really be with yourself. So be mindful of that. Focus on what's inside your control. Now, this is something that we spoke a little bit about at the start, but I want you to visualize how you can focus on what's inside your control. And this diagram, I love this diagram. So on the inside, we have this tiny dot that is what's inside your control. And usually we spend lots of time swimming in that big sea that is the lighter blue section, the outside of your control. A lot of people who are quite anxious in nature will always be living in this lighter blue section. And you might be as well. You might be that person who always says, well, you know, what's going to happen next? When will this happen? When will I find a job? When will I get to see my sister? When will I get to do these things? When we live like that, our mind starts to race. Okay, our mind starts racing and overthinking and trying to plan on things that we just can't plan. These are things that are outside of your control. You cannot and will not be able to control those things. So what I ask you to do is, when you feel your mind is questioning the things that are outside of your control, bring yourself back. Okay, actively say, I don't know when the flight will open. All right, I don't know when I'll be back working in person with my colleagues. So I've acknowledged that that is something I can't control, but I can control A, B, C, D. What can you control? You can control who you speak to. You can control what movements you engage in. You can control what your dietary requirements are, what time you go to bed at. Always control the things that you can control, okay? I'll give you an example. When am I going to get to see my family? I haven't seen them in a year and a half, all right? That's outside my control. I, Anna, have acknowledged that thought, and I am saying, okay, I cannot control that, but what I can control is communicating with my family. So I'm going to pick up my phone right now and I'm going to call them, and I'm going to feel connected, and I'm going to tell them I miss them, and I'm going to ask them questions, okay? I will feel fulfilled the minute I engage in that action. So focus on the things that you can control, okay? Do what you can do. And this links to that slide where I said, when your mind is out of control, focus on the physical body, okay? Actions are empowering and they counteract fear. Do not wait for motivation. You know, many of you might think, I never want to go to the gym. You know, you're driving past the gym after work today, or, you know, someone asks you, hey, do you want to go for a walk? And you say, oh, I'm not bothered. I'm not motivated. Guess what? You're not meant to be motivated. Most people are not. But I guarantee you that the minute you finish that walk or that phone call or whatever it might be, you will feel instantly more motivated to do it again. So just start. Always remember that tiered process of a stairs. All right, take one step, because the minute you take one step, it will be so much easier just to keep walking up those steps. Make the most of it. Now, I know some of you might be thinking on the other side of your screens, how can I make the most of this? I'm not going through a good time. I'm struggling. Things are not the way I want them to be. I've had to cancel plans. I've had to miss out on things. But the thing is, you have to deal with what you have. And when you accept that and you start working on those things that you can control, then and only then will you be able to find yourself again, and you will start to see the negative things less. All right. So have a personal or a family strategy. What does that mean? Have a routine. All right. We are anchored by our routine as human beings. What does that mean? Anchor. So if you think about the anchor of a ship, it throws the anchor down and there is some sense of steadiness. There is some sense of normality brought back to that ship. And your family and your body is like a ship. So if you wake up every day and you say, look, I've no plans for the evening or this weekend or tomorrow, don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what time I'm going to set my alarm tomorrow, this will bring you anxiety. This will bring you a sense of feeling overwhelmed, because everything will be outside of your control. Whereas if you have a personal or a family strategy and have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday laid out, it will help you. Now, I'm not telling you to fill every hour. It might be Saturday, free time. You might just write open space, not doing anything, not driving my car, but having a family strategy and a routine with some anchors during the week will help you and everyone around you. All right. It might be things like going to the gym on a Monday, having a family takeaway on a Tuesday, calling my siblings on a Wednesday. Okay. Having these written down or typed into your laptop or wherever you are will help you reset and help you reorganize yourself. Because when this thing goes out of control, you go back to your schedule and you keep going. You power through that schedule, and then you will start to catch up. Your mind might be running behind you, but if you physically keep going with your plans, the mind will catch up. So be mindful of that. Dress the part is another one. What does this mean? There's a really interesting research that was done, and it's called Enclothed Cognition. And what they did was they set a group of participants in this research a task where they dressed them in different clothes for different activities. So an example was they dressed them in their sports gear, in their active leisure gear for going to sleep. And what they found was their sleep was completely compromised. These participants, were not able to go asleep as fast as when they were wearing their pajamas. This is your brain's subconscious ability to know what your dress is saying about you. So if you're working from home and you're wearing a pajamas every day and you refuse to get into your working clothes, what will happen is your brain will not switch on to the same capacity as if you were wearing your working clothes in the office. So I'm not telling you to stay at home and wear a suit and tie every day. But what I am telling you is to dress the part. And it doesn't mean wearing a shirt up here just because you're on Zoom and wearing pajamas underneath. It means dressing the full way, dressing the part. If you usually get up and brush your hair or have a shower or whatever you do those things, whether you're working at home or whether you're going to the office, because the way that you dress will affect how your mind and how you cognitively perceive things. All right, be mindful about that. Own your morning and claim your evening. What do I mean? Okay, I'll explain it like this. When we wake up in the morning, your energy and motivations levels are flat. All right, they're here. Okay, but as the morning goes on, your energy and motivation just keeps going until lunchtime. It peaks, and then after lunchtime it drops back down to lower than it was that morning. All right, energy and motivation. This is fact. This is research based. So if you are that person who's saying to yourself, I'm going to answer those difficult emails or start that project at 3 p.m. Think again, okay? You will not have the energy, the capacity, the motivation to do it. So get the tough stuff done in the morning. Whatever are those things that you're putting off, do it in the morning, because as the hours go on, you will see that you will start to decrease. Even if you might feel still energized after lunchtime, I promise you that your brain will not be able to work at the same capacity and potential as it does in the morning. So be mindful of that. Limit your news sources, okay? Some people go and panic and they buy gossip or they buy social media. Other people will buy into everything that they see online or on the newspaper or however you get your news from. Unfortunately, a lot of us receive fragmented information, right? So if you're flicking on your Facebook, your Instagram, wherever you are, Twitter, you'll probably read some things, all right? You probably won't click on that and read the whole story, but as a result, your brain will pick up on all of these tragic or kind of stimulating headings, and you will put all of that fragmented information together, and that will be your story. And you probably will know 1% of that true story, but that's what you will be buying into, and that's what you will engage in. So be mindful of that. Turn off those notifications. Stop reading things that you do not need to read. What we recommend is 1 hour a day, one time in the day. And I would not recommend before you go to bed, because you will overthink it when you try and sleep. One local and one global source of news regarding COVID or flight notifications or whatever you need, vaccines. One thing and one thing only. If you open yourself up to all of the other news, you're not going to get a valid picture. We always recommend trusted resources. Go to WHO, the World Health Organization, to get what you want to hear, okay? You might want to look at a local one as well, because we do need to know what's going on where we are living, but be mindful of that. Do not feed the beast, okay? Our brains are wired to detect the negative stuff, all right? If you are flicking on Facebook and you see the title, man dead in whatever it might be, you will focus on that compared to anything else that you're flicking on. So be mindful. Our brains are magnets for negative news. So start to focus on the things that you need to look at, and only that. Conscious connections, okay? We know that connections are contagious. Negative connections and positive connections. I'll give you an example. If you are constantly surrounding yourself by that one friend who constantly gives you the negative news, okay, constantly tells you the things that you kind of want to hear but you don't want to hear, and then you start to overthink, and all of a sudden you're wondering why you're overwhelmed, okay? Set boundaries with those people or that person, okay? Because they are and can be very toxic to you and your mental health. And sometimes it really is about having a brave conversation with that person and saying, hey, I don't like you sending me those COVID numbers every morning. I had to do it. I have people who send me things that I don't like. And sometimes I ignore them, but sometimes I have to say, because I don't want that to ruin my friendship with that person. Sometimes you have to say, look, I want us to go for dinner tonight, but I have a rule. I don't want you to talk about work, or I don't want you to talk about the vaccines or the numbers in wherever country you are. I don't want you to do that. I want to mind and look after and nourish our friendship. And we're going to do that by only talking about those things during certain times. It is a brave conversation. Not all of us are ready to do it, but I promise it will help you. Be creative with online hangouts. A lot of people, and even I think I have to remind myself sometimes, I felt at the start of COVID, I was better able to connect with people on Zoom and visual platforms, let's say. You know, we had weekly meetings as families, we had fun, we got social. And I feel now I'm just kind of at that stage where sometimes I have to remind myself, I might feel like I'm over it, but those connections and that Zoom meeting is so much better than having a phone call. Being able to visualize and see those people that you are not able to connect to right now physically is so important. And as I said, don't wait for the motivation to come, because sometimes it's only when we're in that Zoom meeting and we're laughing or we're crying, that's when we say to our peers or our friends or family, wow, we should do this more often. Have you ever heard yourself saying that, right? Why don't we do this every week? And then you just forget again. So actively put these conscious Zoom dates or whatever they might be into your calendar, because if they're not in that routine that I mentioned before, they probably will never go into it. Develop a plan to stay in touch with 3 to 5 people always, okay? No matter what kind of uncertain situation you are going through. And this should not be 3 to 5 people from one group. It should be 3 to 5 people from work, maybe from your social life, from your family, from your neighborhood, wherever it might be. Do not pick people that are all in the one area of your life. Make your home a sanctuary, declutter. Research out there shows that if we're messy on the outside, we're messy in here as well. So even though you might feel that your apartment or your villa is quite messy, but you're fine, you're able to avoid the obstacles, it doesn't work like that, guys. You need to declutter, you need to get organized. If you have an organized desk, you will have an organized start to the day and an organized mind. Do the things that you need to make you feel okay, all right? If you need to buy flowers once a week, in Spinneys or wherever you shop, buy those flowers. If you need an incense candle or you need some nice piece of art on the wall, you do that, because I know they're small changes, but how our environment looks will affect how you behave, how you think, and how you feel. So be mindful of that. Stay close to the moment. I guess this is something that we always need to be mindful of. A lot of us try and plan too much, all right? We say, I'm so overwhelmed with work. I'm so overwhelmed with the kids. I have too many things to do in work. I give up, all right? When we focus on too much, we get nothing done. So as I said before, ask yourself, what is the smallest step that I need to take today? What is the smallest thing I need to do on that work project? Maybe I just need to make a to-do list. That's all I'm doing today. Maybe I need to reach out and make a phone call. But the minute you take that first step, everything else will start to come naturally. But it's the avoidance and the putting to one side what builds our sense of feeling overwhelmed and anxious. All right? Highlight the positive. Now, I'm not contradicting myself, because for those of you who are here at the very start, I did say that I don't want you to force positivity on yourself and other people, but that is not what I'm doing. I'm not telling you to be very optimistic all the time, because it's not fair and it's not right to be too positive when bad things happen, all right? But you have to remember that your brain is wired for negativity, all right? So if you are always waking up and saying, oh, what a terrible day it's going to be, I'm not going to get this or that, or I'm going to get given out in work, I'm going to get shouted at, I'm going to have an argument with my wife today, whatever it is. If you let your brain unravel like that, your brain will naturally go into auto-negative, we call it negative autopilot, where it will just start reaming in all the negative things. So actively focus on the positive a little bit. It might just be reminding yourself every day what you are grateful for. And I always tell my clients to do this, and I do it myself, where every day, no matter how bad or good the day has been, I will always end with my family in saying, what one or what 3 things am I grateful for today? And it might be the smallest things, like, you know, I made my breakfast today, or we sat together and we had a talk for 20 minutes as a family, or I acknowledge that person that I've been avoiding in work today. Whatever it is for you, what I want you to do is start to focus on those tiny things that you are grateful for, and your brain will actively start to be more grateful and look for positive things as we go through every day. All right. So I'm almost finished, so I will ask you guys over the next few slides to please type in any questions that you have, and I will try and answer my very best. I would also love your feedback on what you liked about today, what you want more of, what you want less of. All right, these are some apps. Please feel free to take a screenshot or a picture of this. These are apps that we recommend, that we use here as clinicians in the Lighthouse, but we do recommend it to our clients as well. They are meditation apps. Some of them are breathing apps, but we do highly recommend these. They're very useful as a place to get started. All right. For those of you who would like to connect with us on social media, we have different platforms that I would like to share with you. Our main platform is on Instagram, and that is the LightHouse Arabia. Dr. Saliha Alfridi is our director here at the Lighthouse, and she also has her own Instagram handle where she shares weekly vlogs and blogs and tips and tricks about everything that's going on in the world, but also in our emotions as well. So you can reach out to her as well. We have parenting ones you can see here, youth, and you name it, everything. For those of you who might have teenagers, we're also on TikTok, or if you yourself are on TikTok, you can find us there too. All right, I'm going to open up for some questions, and when I am waiting for questions, I would like to thank all of you who have to leave. It's been a pleasure. I know that it's hard to talk about all of these things in such a short time frame, but thank you for being with me. I really hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you feel that you've learned something that maybe you didn't know before, and I hope that I meet some of you in person at some stage. Thank you for being with me, and I'm going to get to the questions. I will answer as many as I can. All right, okay. Lots of you saying thank you. You are most welcome. Can you email the recording? Absolutely. We have a recording that we will definitely send to you. People asking about sleep, but I think I've got to that question already. What are support networks that we can have when we are down? Support networks. I think that's a really good question. In terms of support networks, what I would mention is even though you might not want to talk to people, okay, we were never meant to get through uncertain times alone, just like we're never meant to grieve the loss of somebody or something alone. We're not meant to do it alone. We might not feel like we want to be around other people, or we talk to or talk or communicate with other people, but having some kind of outlets with different people is really important. Whether you're listening to them or they're listening to you, they will not have the answer. And a lot of the time, their answer and response to you is never going to change your situation. But sometimes having someone to listen to what you're going through and to just be there and acknowledge that what you're feeling is real and validate you is the best gift that a friend or connection can give you, okay? So reach out to people. Find someone that you feel comfortable with talking about your mental health or talking about when you feel down. Because I promise you, as I've said before, the minute we verbally express how we're feeling is the second that we actually feel a small sense of relief. You might not feel cured or fixed in any way, but you will feel less heavy. All right. Journaling is another one. If you're really not ready to talk to anyone, draw or write down what you're feeling down about. Sometimes when we say it or write it down, we are externalizing all of those feelings out of our body onto a piece of paper, onto a drawing, onto something, and that can be really, really helpful. All right. Someone is saying about using positive language, positive behavior, definitely. And someone has mentioned a negative PCR test using positive behavior as well. I think that's humor as well. I definitely think, and you know, we all do it. I don't know how many PCRs I've had at this stage, weekly, I think. But you know, we always convince ourselves that's your brain's ability. How many of you have felt before you've had a PCR that you've had COVID? So many. I've definitely thought, I've imagined symptoms that I probably never would have had. But our brain does that. We convince ourselves of things that our brain wants us to. So we have to focus on what we know, what is there in front of us. Always be mindful with that language. And I always say this to kids and to parents as well. The language that you use as a parent or to yourself, if you're not a parent, is the language that your brain will start to adapt to. Okay, so be mindful. Someone asked, can I recommend some exercises or some exercises or meditation that we can also do? Okay, really good question. The apps that I just shared on the previous page, you can plug them into your headset. These are really, really good apps for a short 5-minute, 10-minute break where you can just switch off, fix yourself, get back to the present moment and ground yourself, okay? That's really, really important. That's grounding in itself. So I would say use those. In terms of exercises in the office, I would say just move. Go up and down the stairs, get out of the environment, walk up and down, walk around in circles if you feel comfortable doing that in front of your colleagues. But even just walking outside is really helpful. It just detaches yourself from a second. It just goes. An interesting thing I was reading the other day was about smokers. And I'm not telling any of you to go smoke, absolutely not. But one of the reasons that they said that people, and this was research-based, people went for a cigarette or a vape or whatever they did, was to switch environments. It was to move, it was to switch off. What they engaged in when they went outside was up to them. But even it proved that having the ability to stand up and separate yourself from your environment is a coping strategy. So walk outside. Get outside, stand outside with those people, stare into the road or the sky or space or wherever you are, but just move your environments, because the minute you do that, you will be able to reconnect. You will be able to reset your batteries, think out loud, and get back into an environment that you are coming from, but with maybe a different mindset or outlook on what you have to do. All right. In terms of exercises in general, as I mentioned, I'm not telling you guys to go to the gym and go crazy. You can do that if you want, 100%. But there are some activities that are really regulating, okay? We know, evidence-based, that stretching and heavy work, so using weights, is more regulating in nature. When we use weights, we trigger our proprioceptive system, okay? The receptors for this system are embedded deep in the muscle fibers. So when you lift heavy weights, when you go up and down the stairs, when you do a pull-up, when you do push-ups, for example, when you put the resistance on your bicycle, you are moving your muscles more. And when we trigger this proprioceptive system, dopamine and serotonin is released. What are those things? They are calming on the body. They are regulating in nature. They will calm you down. Think about it. Have you ever heard someone saying that they did a big weight session in the gym, or they climbed a mountain and they say, wow, I just feel very distressed after that. I got it all out in the gym. That's why they're not getting it out of their head. Their physical body is releasing stress. So just get moving, whatever it might be. How can I manage other people's expectations? Sometimes not meeting them or being the best for them hurts. I would say being honest. Okay, honesty is the biggest thing that you can do. And this is something that I practice. And I mean that. I'm not just telling you this from a professional standpoint. I'm telling it to you from a personal one. When you're that person who never can meet expectations and nobody knows why, or nobody knows what's going on, or they think, you have different priorities. Sometimes you just need to acknowledge that and say, I am struggling a little bit. I don't know how to manage these expectations, and I want to be transparent with you. I want to be honest, and I'm putting it on the table because I'm hoping that you can understand a little bit more. And I'm doing it for myself, but also for you. And sometimes having that sense of being realistic and transparent can be really eye-opening to the other person. Giving someone that little sense of how vulnerable you are can help them become more vulnerable and understand your situation rather than just avoiding it. So I would say be a little bit more vulnerable. Be vulnerable with them. There's another question here: how to blend in with my team as a newcomer. Be vulnerable with your team. What happens when we are the new person, right? And I'm thinking back to a job that I walked into. I walked into the new job thinking, I want to be Anna. I want them to get my vibe. I want to put up my walls, my boundaries, my barriers. I don't want anyone to knock me. I don't want this to happen. And what happens is sometimes we try so hard not to be vulnerable and to let everyone see the best version of ourselves, that the other team that already have that click or that friendship, they already know all of their own vulnerabilities. They think, wow, who's this amazing team member coming in? I don't think she'd fit in with us. I don't think he's going to click with us. So being vulnerable with a team and being honest and letting them into your real personality can really help them bring you into their tribe and welcome you into the team as a newcomer. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go and spill all your worries on them and your stressors, but just being real with them, being open and honest and putting yourself out there a little bit can really help people be more receptive to you, because they will know that, wait a second, maybe she's okay, maybe he's okay, maybe she's one of us or he's one of us. Maybe we can actually have open conversations. So be mindful of that. I hope that answers your question. Lots of you saying thank you. You are most welcome. Thank you for being with me. Is the session available on social media platform? No, but you will be sent the recording. Please feel free to share it with whoever you like if you feel that they would benefit from it. Shift person, how can they manage their sleep? That's a really good question, and that's really difficult. It's about having, you're not going to get the ideal sleep that would be recommended, but it's about acknowledging that and coming with some kind of sleep routine. It's very difficult for people to switch on and off when they're on shifts. So have that routine to a T, where you follow it when you are sleeping, that you follow your bedtime. Even if you're going to sleep at 7 a.m. in the morning, you have what we call a sleep hygiene routine, in that you do the same things every single time before you sleep. So it's not about coming home from your shift, collapsing into bed. It might be about eating some slow releasing energy foods. It might be about doing some meditation, having a warm bath, closing yourself down, reading a book, whatever it might be, but have that routine, because that will prepare your mind for getting into that deep sleep, and stick to that routine. Okay. We have an amazing webinar available on YouTube. Dr. Saliha Alfredi from the Lighthouse has done it. If you type it into YouTube, you should find it. It's on sleep, the science of sleep, how you can get a better sleep, and why sleep is very important. Is it okay not to meet other people's expectations? 100%. You meet your own expectations, but acknowledging that you can't meet those expectations is up to you. Put that expectation on yourself, because if you're accepting expectations that you cannot manage, it makes you look like you cannot manage your time. Whereas a real, true professional will stand up and say, no, I can't take on that project this week because I'm looking at my diary and I have too much on. Okay, sometimes we get wrapped up in saying yes to people too much. Okay, we say, yeah, sure, no problem. Sometimes this is being a perfectionist. Okay, and sometimes being a perfectionist is driven by the wrong things. Sometimes it's driven by being a people pleaser, by a willingness to succeed that is just trying to meet other people's expectations. And as a result, you are left feeling burnt out. You are feeling like you've given everything and you cannot give any more, and you're trying to chase the other person's expectations. Whereas a true professional and someone who's very self-aware will say, I'm sorry, but that deadline you gave me is not long enough. I'm looking at my schedule. I can't physically do that. And I'm not going to bring my work home at the weekend. Okay. It's about knowing your boundaries and knowing what you can and cannot do and communicating that. That's why leaders delegate work. That is why people at the top do not always bring their work home. That's why they say, I'm busy. If there's an emergency, call this person. It's about knowing yourself, what you can do. Do not risk your mental health for other people, because that expectation will always be there and you will never be able to catch yourself. You'll always be running ahead. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions. There are quite a lot more, but I believe they are very similar to the ones that I've just answered. Stuck in a negative thought, how do I get out of that? Okay. And that's the last question I'll answer. I would say a negative thought. It's about acknowledging the negative thought, okay? If we say negative thought's coming in at us and you're pushing it away, don't think about it. don't want to think about it, I'll wait about it till tomorrow, that thought's going to explode and it's going to be like compressing against you. So acknowledge it. Say, this is my negative thought. Say it out loud. Acknowledge what I said before. Is this inside of my control? Is it outside of my control? If this negative thought is outside of my control, you need to park it and say, I cannot do that, but I can do this. Okay, acknowledgement. Acknowledge it and focus on something else. It's not about when that negative thought comes, pushing it aside. As you're typing, you're working on a project, you're on the phone, the negative thought comes in, acknowledge it. Acknowledge, okay, I see it. I'm working on this now. I've acknowledged you. I'm going to put you back and think about you more later on, so that you're constantly shifting it. A grounding technique that I always use is really helpful when you're really lost in your thoughts up here. And if you type into Google grounding techniques, how to do a grounding exercise, it will say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now let's see if I can get this right. So it's where you really ground yourself, and by ground yourself, it means coming back to the present moment. Literally means grounding yourself to the earth. So you look at 5 things that you can, and you say it out loud or you think about it, 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can hear, 3 things that I can touch, 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. Okay. It's the exact same technique as bringing yourself back to the physical body instead of getting lost in your thoughts that I mentioned before. All right. Okay, guys, we are out of time. For those of you who I didn't get to answer your questions, please feel free to reach out to me, reach out to anyone or us in general from the LightHouse Arabia, and we're happy to help you. I know the weekend is coming for many people. I hope that you have a lovely, beautiful weekend, whatever you're doing. Hope that you enjoyed today. Thank you for being with me. If you ever see me in the clinic or out and about, please come say hi. Pleasure being with you. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.